Hey, it's Everyday Shenanigans, and thanks for joining me. This commentary is pertaining to the U.S. versus Robert Sylvester Kelly. As most of you know who are following the storyline and the trial, the federal trial of Robert Kelly, he stands accused of many crimes. Racketeering is one of the said charges. He also has two holds on him in two other jurisdictions, which would be Chicago and Minnesota. So no matter what happens in this said verdict, he still will have to face said charges in those two jurisdictions. This commentary is pertaining to what will the jury decide. As most of you know, they are currently in deliberations pertaining to the fate of Robert Kelly. What do you think? Do you think he will be found innocent? Do you think he will be found guilty? That is the said information. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to play you commentary by BNC. This is the Black News Channel. You can go into the YouTube queue to find said commentary by this network. And this will be the attorney that was representing R. Kelly before the other two African-American attorneys jumped on board this summer. And I'm going to play commentary by him. And you are entitled to chop it up as you see fit. What you think of the said charges? Are these real charges, trumped up charges? He will give his commentary, basically that he doesn't feel that these charges are adequate. That perhaps this is all about a man with kinky habits. Hello, Dama Dozen. Thanks for joining me. I'll play the said commentary. This is by BNC. Thank you for joining me.
Joining us now to analyze the trial so far is one of R. Kelly's attorneys, Steve Greenberg. Thank you for being here with us today on BNC Live, and let's get right to it. Knowing what you know about this trial and your experience preparing for his other cases, what can you tell us about how the defense did?
Well, we'll see when the verdict comes back. I mean, if they win, they did wonderful, and if they lose, we can then take a scalpel to it and figure everything out. I think that the correspondent made a good point. It's really a difference here of, did R. Kelly have an operation that was designed to assist him and help him maintain his sex life? And the prosecutors say aspects of that sex life were illegal. They brought up a lot of things that weren't illegal, maybe were a little kinky or things like that, or immoral, which probably should not have come into the trial. But did he have this group operating to help him to maintain a illegal sex life, or is this just his lifestyle? If this is just his lifestyle, and he did things illegally, and there are illegal aspects to it, it's not a RICO offense. The government needs that furtherance element. They need those around him to be assisting him, to want to help him. They need it to be part of their jobs, that people would get fired if they didn't do these things, that they would get punished if they didn't do these things. That's where I think the weakness exists in the government's case. It doesn't exist in whether or not R. Kelly had sex with these women. Many of them, the sex was consensual and open and notorious, as we say. But it's in the RICO aspects of it that I think he should prevail in.
But we did hear some people testify that if they didn't sort of follow his orders, they would be docked pay. If that sticks, is that an implication that there was punishment for not following the alleged operation?
Well, but punishment for what? So if my employees here at my firm don't do what they're supposed to do, they're not going to get a raise. Maybe they get fired. Maybe they don't get a bonus. Maybe they get some other kind of a sanction, for lack of a better term. That doesn't mean that I'm acting to maintain, or they're assisting me in maintaining, a criminal enterprise. So some of that evidence that came in fact, all of it that I heard, related to things that were unrelated to the charged crimes.
They made the decision not to put R. Kelly on the stand. Is that a tactic that you're considering?
Well, R. Kelly made that decision. It's a defendant's right. There's certain fundamental decisions that only a defendant can make in a case, whether or not to have a jury trial or a judge-only trial, whether to plead guilty or not plead guilty. That's up to a defendant. And the third of those is whether to testify or not to testify. So they could consult with them. They could advise them in that regard. I don't want to get into what those discussions were because they're privileged discussions, just as when we represent him, they're privileged discussions.
So I have to ask you about a strategy that is generating a lot of conversation about sort of a comparison of R. Kelly to Martin Luther King Jr. Your thoughts on that, and will that be mirrored?
Well, I think that, and I've read some of the criticism, and I've read some people who thought it was brilliant.
Showing out, man.
I think that was targeted at some specific jurors. They do have some African-American jurors, and I think the message there was, look, Martin Luther King fought for these ideals. He fought so that people would have certain rights, and we're asking you to remember that fight, to remember those rights, and to understand that we are a nation of laws, and those laws apply equally to everyone, no matter how you like them, you dislike them, or anything like that. So I think that was the message. He picked Martin Luther King. Is that who I would have picked? Obviously not. I think for that particular jury,
yes, that was wrong.
He can draw that example. I couldn't draw that example. I've told young lawyers that some lawyers can get up and sound like a Baptist minister in closing argument. Mr. Kanik is one of those guys. I try and sound like a Baptist minister in closing argument. The jurors are going to start laughing at me.
So based on what you've seen and heard and read, and even your conversations with Kelly, how will this shape how you frame your cases moving forward?
Well, I think they're very different cases. Our case involves business transactions, essentially. It's a case in the federal case here in Chicago for obstruction of justice. They have videos that he supposedly tried to pay people off not to testify about and pay people off to destroy. And so ours is much more of a traditional federal case. This case that they presented here was kind of like a state court case, a sex case. Our case is more like a fraud case, or it's an obstruction case, but it's essentially a document-driven case.
Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Okay, that's the said information by BNC pertaining to Robert Kelly. That is one of his former attorneys speaking, and you're entitled to your opinion, what you think of Robert Kelly, what he did not do. But I think the fact that he had outside people testify that did not have sex with him allegedly, such as his employees, showed you his demeanor as a human being, that he was cutthroat. He had no respect for people, period. It did not matter if you were a child, an adult, someone he had sexual relations with, someone who worked for him. He had a mean undertone, and most people did not know that, because how would you know how he was behind closed doors as far as a lover, friend, employer? So now you have employees telling you, hey, this man had these strict guidelines, and everything really with the strict guidelines was pertaining to women. So it still goes to show he was trying to rule these women, that he involved his employees as well. Take them out on an errand. Don't speak to them. Don't give eye contact. Just crazy nonsense. Can't tell people they can't talk to one another. They can't look at one another. And I don't even know why anyone would even go along with that, because it's one thing to be a gopher. Are you getting paid for your gophering skills? Then you're going to tell me how I can talk, what I can do while I'm out gophering people around. See, that shows you R. Kelly is a grand narcissist. So it wasn't just abusing the women physically, emotionally, sexually, videotaping, which everybody knows that's against the law, taping people without their consent, video recording without their consent. In some states, it is against the law. Then you're talking about taping somebody in a sexual act, very vile and disrespectful. And it's an invasion of privacy to tape a person having sex because you didn't ask them. But it just shows you he's a narcissist. He's not this guy that people thought he was, charismatic. That's all facade. And everyone knows with a sociopath, that's what they do. They mimic what looks good of a human being. Oh, he looks nice. They talk nice. They're dressed nice. Blah, blah, blah. Has nothing to do with who the person actually is. And now we know a little bit more about R. Kelly. You know, it was one thing years ago when the video surfaced back in 2002. When that video was released of the said 14-year-old in the video having sex with Mr. Kelly and other women was also in that said video, it showed you that somebody didn't like R. Kelly. I think some of you forgot about that, especially you 12 members that voted him not guilty in the Chicago trial. Somebody didn't like R. Kelly because they took that video and they released it to the public to shame him and shame the women that were in that video. But more or less, they didn't like R. Kelly. So somebody in his camp released that video. You can best believe that. To want pocket money for themselves and betray Robert Sylvester Kelly. So you see, everybody wasn't his friend, as people are claiming that they were. They were not. CBS Chicago is my next commentary pertaining to Robert Kelly. Breaking down the R. Kelly cases, jury deliberations begin.
It could come in a matter of days. The New York jury went home today after deliberating just a few hours tonight. Dr. Terry, live from the Dirksen Federal Building, where Kelly will eventually return to hear his trial here in Illinois. Gerard.
Brad, so whatever the NYC jury decides, we have to remember that the R&B singer still has 2 charges, including one here at the Dirksen Building here in Chicago. Tonight, a legal expert weighs in about what's next, no matter the NYC verdict.
Mr. Kelly and his defense team, they are going to have some sleepless nights.
If there is a guilty verdict, what does that mean for Illinois and the cases here in Chicago?
I think it does not bode well for R. Kelly. It becomes an indicator of what might happen in future cases.
Would they continue on with the cases?
These cases are expensive. They use resources. They make witnesses and victims relive trauma. We've seen nothing to indicate that the Illinois cases will not go forward if there's a conviction.
Let's say we get a not guilty on the federal racketeering charges. What happens to the cases here in Illinois?
Both the federal prosecutors and the county prosecutors are going to look very closely at their evidence. They're going to want to shore up any holes that they identify after seeing what happened in New York, and really focus in on their strongest charges that are easy for a jury to understand.
The longer we wait for a verdict, does that normally lean towards whose benefit?
I think a quick verdict in a criminal case like this would certainly be a strong sign for the prosecution. I think that at some point, a longer period of deliberation weighs in favor for the defense, at least as to some of the charges. The longer we go, it means they're carefully evaluating the evidence.
If there is a mistrial in New York, how does that affect the cases here in Chicago?
A hung jury, a mistrial, is not good for the prosecution, and it's not a good sign if they're trying to bring future cases against the defendant.
If convicted in New York, Kelly faces up to life in prison. He has denied all charges. Live outside the Dirksen Federal Building tonight, Gerard Terry, CBS 2 News.
Gerard, thank you. Stay with CBS.
Okay, wow. So life, we were sitting here trying to figure out. Some of you have asked that question the other day. What is the amount of time that Robert Sylvester Kelly is facing if indeed found guilty? And as you heard here with CBS Chicago, life in prison. That's a long time. That's death, basically. You're going to die in there. And they also said that if he's found not guilty, hung jury, it wouldn't look good for the prosecution for the upcoming case in Chicago and Minnesota. But I'm hoping he is found guilty. I think it's time for this reign of terror to stop. You see, people continue to be demons because they have been allotted the opportunity to do so. You know, you have all type of crimes out here that people commit against other people. And the reason why a lot of people remain predators is because they have been allotted to. There's always been whispers about certain type of behavior, such as what R. Kelly had been doing in Chicago and around the United States. there are many people in Chicago have said they knew that he hung outside the high school looking and gaping at young girls. And that was a known thing then in Chicago. So what you have to ask yourself is, why is a grown man hanging outside of a high school? Robert Kelly had the opportunity to finish high school and he chose not to for whatever reason. And I find it baffling that his mother was a school teacher allegedly, and she had this child who obviously had many demons, also was sexually assaulted by a neighbor and sister, and then you allow your child to not finish high school. Why is that? Because he couldn't live in my house and not finish school. That would be a no-no. You're not going to lay up in here and lounge around for free and not finish school. And his brother also had told years ago with the Surviving R. Kelly installment that he was a recluse and stayed in the house. So once again, let's go back in time with the mother who was the caretaker of the children. Why was your child a recluse? Why was your child staying in the house? Why was he not mingling with other children, being a child, playing outside? You see, all those little things formed Robert Kelly's identity. The being touched by grown-ups, his own sister, staying in the house. Maybe it was the fear of being, in the inner city. I don't know, because I don't know his family dynamic. But of course, there were rumors about the mother that perhaps Robert Kelly was a product of sexual improprieties on his mom by a father and or stepfather. You see, we have learned that sexual abuse is a generational curse in some families, that the baton is passed on willing and unwillingly by many. And we know this with predators, that most predators have been sexually assaulted by adults and or other children. And then they grow up to be predators, possibly not wanting to be, but they do. And they don't seek help for the demons inside. So therefore, they go out and enact the same atrocious crimes to others that was inflicted on them as children. But nonetheless, R. Kelly is an adult, and at some point he should have known his fascination with children was unacceptable, is unacceptable. The fact that I watched commentary that says he's illiterate. I watched that yesterday, commentary in the queue. And I said, well, someone's now verifying that. Hello, honey, good morning. That Robert Kelly is illiterate. So let's go there. How in the hell did you write your music? So you mean to tell me as you're in the studio, you're spinning these songs out of your head. That means someone is writing them down. Someone is taping them. Most would find that odd. So what are you saying? You can't read. You can't comprehend. So the person who is the, as I would say, the decoder, where are you? Because you have to hold the secrets as well. That Robert Kelly couldn't read or write. Imagine that. Imagine someone singing a song about I Could Believe I Could Fly, but they can't even damn read or write. Am I hearing this correctly? Now, think about that for just a second, for those of you who are R. Kelly fans. I believe I can fly, but I can't damn read or write. Shut up, Queen. Baffling. So that means somebody was writing down his every word, putting it to paper. Who is that person or persons? Because you hold the secret of knowing he can't read or write. And the people who work with him knew he couldn't read or write. So that's why we know that he had these other people in his fold doing these devious acts to aid these kids, women. So to say that the charges are inadequate is a lie. They are adequate. And that's where the racketeering charges come in. You hired other people to enact these crimes. Solicit the girls, solicit the boys, solicit the men, women. You did that. Because you didn't do it on your own? That's obvious. That's been said. Somebody passed me his number. Who would lie about that? That's not even anything to lie about. Someone passed you a grown man's number. That's stuff kids do. Pass. Hey, homeboy, here's some. Give homegirl my telephone number. It's not. It's not behavior of a grown man. And yes, we do see grown men who will do that. Say, hey, holler at her for me. No, I ain't hollering at her for nothing. You go holler at her. She's right there. Gophers. And I wouldn't even want to be known as a damn gopher. Passing numbers to children. Passing numbers to men and women. For what? You want to talk to her or him? Go talk to him yourself. I'm not going to pass your number. I'm not going to do any of that. But that just goes to show you he is a narcissist. He thought his SHIT didn't stink. He used people to bed these people. But it's obvious because most of the people who speak have spoken that one thing. If you don't believe one thing true about R. Kelly, that was proven. He used people to get their numbers. So ask yourself, why would I not think these same people would do other atrocious things on behalf of Robert Kelly? Because if a grown man can't even walk up to you and say, hello, how are you? What's your phone number? Come on now. He can't even speak to you? He's that important? He's so famous, he can't even say, hello, how are you? Good evening, how you doing? Would you like to come backstage? Would you like to have lunch, dinner? Which we already know that wasn't his repertoire to ask you, would you like to eat? Would you like to go out for dinner? Hello, everybody. He used people to get other people. So the people who work with R. Kelly, who did all these felonious acts, burning cars, setting things on fire, threatening people, you are really the biggest dummy. You talk bad about the women all day, but you gophers, you're more sad and pathetic than anybody because you let an illiterate man, yeah, Queen gonna say that today. I'm going to keep it real this morning. You let a man who could not read or write manipulate you to solicit children and grown-ups for sex. And for a small fee of whatever the hell he was paying you to now look at where it turned out. And you better be glad the U.S. hasn't decided to try some of U.S. co-conspirators. Because with a racketeering charge, there should also be charges of co-conspirators to go down with the said ringleader. Come on, Queen. And that lady who was the ex-manager, whatever her thing is, talent agent, you're so full of SOB. I mean, you're just full of SHIT, excuse me. That interview you gave with ABC News, Good Morning America, whatever, you got to be ashamed of yourself, black lady. You're shameful as a black woman to sit up and say my job stopped at the threshold of his bedroom door. Well, for all I know, you probably screwed R. Kelly. Yeah, I'm gonna say that because we know about R. Kelly. He didn't discriminate. He did not care. He liked men. He liked women. So who's to say he wasn't screwing his staff? Come on, Queen, because that's something we ain't haven't heard of, except for the hairdresser who he solicited and was very disrespectful to her, the girl that braided his hair. And I believe her testimony. Robert didn't care about anybody because Robert didn't care about himself. Robert does not care about himself. Now, if he decides to ever repent, that's between him and Jesus. But the fact he didn't testify tells you everything. Robert knew damn well not to testify because of what happened with Gayle King in that interview. He knew then he tore himself up. So there's no way in hell he was going to get on the stand and let a prosecutor ask him questions because he knew he would trip himself up and he would explode. Hello, everybody. Good morning. He knew he would explode. He knew he would hang himself. And too many people spinning the same story about Robert Kelly. He's just a nasty guy. He's a nasty guy. He likes nasty sex. He talks nasty to you. He's just nasty. You know, fecal matter, urine, all this type of nonsense. You know, we're not talking about menage a trois, sleeping with the same sex, opposite sex, other sexual partners. Okay. When you start talking about bodily fluids, you're on a whole different level. So miss me with the kinky sex comment, ex-lawyer. Something's wrong with Robert Kelly. And due to the fact that there's something wrong with Robert Kelly, the only way that he will stop his behavior is he goes to jail, prison, and sits down for a while. Because if you were to let him go right now, he's found not guilty, he would go back out there and find him a new victims, and the saga would start all over again. The accusations would start all over again. The lawsuits would start all over again. The gossip and the rhetoric would start all over again. It will just be a repeat cycle. Nothing would change. Nothing would change. This is sad, because here is an African-American man, decent looking man that could be so much more than what he's brought to the world. Talented musically, yes, but just a bum Negro who's sick inside. His soul is sick. His mindset is sick. His spirit is sick. And he has no remorse. So therefore, he would do this all over again. It would be a repeat. It's very sad, because there's so many people out here that are talented and they wish they had the opportunity to go in the music business, play sports, go to college, get an education. There are a lot of talented people out here, and they have not been afforded the opportunities such as Robert Kelly and other talented individuals. But you see, it's up to you to decide what you will do with your talent, how you will carry yourself. That's a personal decision. That has nothing to do with a groupie. That has nothing to do with a fan. Has nothing to do with some fans' parents trying to get money. That's on you. And frankly, I think the prosecution proved its case, because everybody is not writing letters that they stole something from someone. Staff members saying he docked our pay because we didn't have women around. I mean, there were guys that took us on tours. He got mad because they weren't women. See, that's showing you his mentality. We take a trip, Disneyland, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Walt Disney. There are no tour guides that are women. What does that tell you? What does that have to do with anything? He's showing you who he is. Everything's sex oriented. I don't want any male tour guides. I'll dock your pay because you hired a male tour guide. But as they say, we don't have anything. What control do we have that we are going on a tour and the tour guide is a guy? That's the company's decision. But that goes to show you R. Kelly, who he is. He knew exactly what he was doing. Everything he did was deliberate and malicious intent. Those who went along with the threatening of people, blackmailing, you are just as vile as R. Kelly, and you are no different than R. Kelly. And you are sick, because in the end, what do you have to show for working for R. Kelly? All the manipulating, the conning, the blackmailing, the threats to the young ladies, their parents, whomever. What do you have now? You don't have shit. You're probably barely living, because you lived off of a guy who's a sociopath. And now you get your 5 minutes of fame talking to a news agent about who Robert Kelly is, and we don't know him. Oh, I think we know him quite well now. We know him quite well. He's sick. He's a very sick individual. And if Robert Kelly is free, it will be another story. By the time next year rolls around, there'll be somebody else talking the same mess that these other people are spinning. There'll be another lawsuit. There'll be another allegation of passing a disease. There will be something else until somebody ends up busting R. Kelly to the white meat. And frankly, he's really lucky to be alive, because he hasn't met the right one that would hit him to the white meat and beat the hell out of him for assaulting their child. You're entitled to believe what you want pertaining to the allegations against Robert Kelly. But in the end, I think enough people have spoken to show you just cause of who he is and what he's about. He's a vile human being, and he chose this road. And he chose to manipulate people and use people to get to other men, women, and children. He doesn't have a sexual preference, which is very baffling and more disturbing, assuming he liked women. He also likes men. He likes boy children. That's been proven. Because you have to think about something. What man would want to admit that R. Kelly solicited him as a child? Most men have pride. Most young boys would have pride about themselves, especially when it comes to sexual orientation. And if a guy is bisexual and still likes women, you think he wants to tell you that he also likes men if nobody even knows he's bisexual or went that route once in his life? Why would I want you to know that? Unless I'm just as callous and cold and a sociopath as R. Kelly. So to admit that R. Kelly came on to you and you fell for it and went along with it tells you a lot. Because most men are not going to want people to know that they like men, especially as a child or a grown-up. And that's what was told in the testimony. Another thing I find interesting is that Jocelyn Savage didn't testify. As far as I know, she didn't testify. It was alleging that she would. So where is she? Did she come to the court to support Robert Kelly? And why would you still be supporting him when the others have folded and told what he is about and what he had done to them? Why would you be the last Mohican to hold court for him? Is it for monetary gain? Because as I told you all, Robert Kelly has to have someone over his personal effects, his estate. So who is that person? Is it you, Jocelyn Savage? Are you the one over his estate? Is it his sister? Who is it? I'm curious. But as I state, if you take nothing away from this storyline pertaining to these women, men, children, boys, girls, whomever, the most interesting part of this story is how long it went on. The people who blindly aided Robert Kelly and still rally behind him. And the fact that you had been hoodwinked and bamboozled by a Negro that can't read or write. You can't make that up no kind of way. But that just goes to show you that even the grandness of a narcissist sociopath can be illiterate and can, hello, trucker, how you doing? Can hoodwink and bamboozle you to do anything they want. And they have the brain of a gnat. Not college educated, didn't finish school, and he can manipulate various people to lie, cheat, steal, con, bribe people, threaten people for the almighty dollar. Now that's something to think about. So dumb he may be, but he was smart enough to get you, somebody who has finished high school, possibly college, to work in his favor to solicit boys and girls and women and men for sexual gratification. Now, who is the biggest loser? If you want to donate to the channel, $ Big Angie 129 Cash App. I'm going to check out of here. But as most of you know, Robert Kelly is facing life in prison on the said charges out of New York. And currently a jury is out deliberating his fate. And we will see what will happen. Will they convict Robert Kelly or will they let him go? But as I state, if he is set free, he is still mandated by the court to face charges in Chicago and Minnesota. So you see, as they would say in the street, free ain't really free. Everyday Shenanigans. Thanks for joining me. I'm out of here. Y'all have a blessed week. Bye-bye.